Hello, thanks for coming out. Oh, is this mic even turned on? Probably not.
We'll use our inside voices.
Well, that's fine. It's a small group. I can actually talk aloud. Thank you for coming to the horrors and joys of horror fiction writing. Our two panelists today, oh, there we go, thank you. Our two panelists today are Matthew Gillies and Erika Knudsen. I knew I was going to screw it up as soon as I saw it. A few actually things we'll say before we get the panel started. There will be no camping out in this one, so once actually this ends, please exit out. Make sure nothing is left around the seats. If you have any drinks or food, make sure you're not spilling them, or if you do, let us know. Keep of course, your phones on vibrate so nothing is interrupting. And we'll take some questions after, of course, we introduce these two and we get them going. We're going to start off with actually a little clip here, and then we're going to get it going. So. Of each one of you. If you can explain how you got into horror writing and, of course, your influences. We'll start with those.
Hello, my name is Matthew Gillies. I'm the author of The Electric Coma Dream, the latest novel, The Master and the Servant, and as well as my other novel, The Cyberpunk Oblivious Paradise. So I've been writing for the last 15 years professionally. Just recently decided to release, to self-publish all my novels. I primarily focus on surreal psychological horror and dark fantasy, and that's essentially what my novels are primarily about. My influences would probably be anybody in the horror genre, like Clive Barker or Stephen King, and that's pretty much it. If you do definitely have any questions, feel free to ask me. And then I'm going to pass this on to Erika now.
Okay, so what am I supposed to say again?
Alright. Okay, well, as you saw, I write the vampire series. I have 3 in there so far. And I have a paranormal thriller series as well. That's about witches, ghosts, and family secrets. I started writing seriously when I was in high school. And I actually had to thank Anne Rice for that. So that's basically what kind of started it for me. I've always had a strange, twisted love for vampires. So I just kind of grew, and from there I wanted to expand, and so I branched out into more paranormal with the witches and ghosts and stuff like that. So that's pretty much how that happened. So,
That was really good answer. I love that.
did that answer?
Perfect. You'll have to excuse us because we're both pretty nervous about this kind of thing.
Well, let's start off by saying what would actually be something you would, when reading other horror authors, something you look for in a book and something you would like to portray in your own books?
I always like when I read certain novels, a lot of times it's the monsters that I like to read about, and it's neat to see how different authors kind of portray these creatures. One of the things I like to do with my novels is I try to create a protagonist who's not necessarily good, but isn't also bad, and the same with the villain. The antagonist in my novels, I always try to make their role a little more ambiguous. I don't want them to be defined as purely evil or purely good. I want them to be a little bit of both. So when you're reading it, you're going, geez, I don't know if I'm really going to root for the good guy or if I want to root for the bad guy, because both seem to have justifiable reasons for what they do. And that's what I tend to look forward to when I read novels, is just kind of finding that link where, they're not necessarily villains because they do bad things, but there's a reason why they're doing those things, and to them it's for the greater good.
I have to agree.
Yeah.
But I also like tortured characters too.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of drawn to that because I don't know.
Okay. Well, actually, we have a question already.
Yeah. They say you're supposed to write what you know.
Yeah.
How much of you are in your books, and how, like in the fantasy horror genre? I've never been tortured before, but you see where I'm going with that. How much of you are in your books, and how much of what you know are in your books?
I would say that. Well, okay, for my okay, we'll go with the vampires because I've been doing it for longer. Every single one of my characters sadly has a trait from me. So, I really haven't lived a tortured life either, but I can imagine it really well. I'm really good at torturing my characters, which is horrible. So maybe I'm the sadistic one, so.
I find it funny that you say that, because that's how I've always looked at it when I read my novels. I'm like, Jesus, I'm an asshole because these poor buggers to death. You're relentless, especially with my novel, The Electric Dream. Everybody who's read it, they always say, geez, you're just cold and heartless to your character. And I'm like, I know I really wanted to do nice things for her, but no, I just felt the need to throw her into another torment to every chapter. But to answer your question, I'd probably say maybe about 10% is me, and that's just emotion-wise. Character, not really. I don't really like writing about things I know, because the things I know I find are quite boring sometimes. But like for instance, The Electric Dream, and this is my novel here, it's essentially about a young woman who falls into a coma and wakes up in this surreal dark fantasy world. Well, there's nothing really, I've never fallen into a coma, I've never experienced that kind of dark fantasy type world that I'm trying to escape from. So everything is just purely from imagination and just from dreaming as well. I tend to, when I go to sleep at night, I tend to think about what I want to write for my next stories or next plot or chapter, and then I just pick apart whatever I dream about the next day and go, okay, maybe I can throw that in here, and then crank up the extreme weirdness a little bit higher. Yeah.
Okay, so does that mean like when you fall asleep and you actually have like a severe nightmare where you're waking up screaming, you actually go, oh, sweet. There's the next chapter. Yeah.
I don't actually dream about what I write. I've been writing vampires for like 20 some odd years, And I think I can count 3 dreams where there were vampires involved.
Well, of course, the panel is called the horrors and joys. So let's actually start with the joys, and then we'll go into the horrors. You can actually explain, the good elements you've actually experienced through becoming an author, and also the worst, for the stuff that's been horrifying. So.
This is better?
All right.
Rock, paper, scissors.
I'll go ahead. So the joys of writing horror is, it's the one thing I love about the genre is the fact that you can go beyond the extreme of what everybody else is writing. So when you look at what's out there right now, like say anything from commercial fiction, everything's pretty much got a nice little structure to it. It's you've got your good guys, you've got your bad guys, you've got your happy endings, or however you want to end it. Whereas with the horror genre, you've got a little more freedom to kind of create graphic characters, create very macabre and sadistic scenes and plot elements, and it's one of those things that allows you a little more freedom than what you would do if you're writing something like a John Grisham novel where you're writing about a lawyer and doing the thriller, the political thrillers and all that. That's what I like the most about the horror genre is the fact that I'm allowed to, or I find that I have more freedom just to write things that are a little more extreme and a little more out there as opposed to grounded in reality.
To be the devil's advocate, the hard part about writing horror genre-related fiction is the fact that fiction in general is not the #1 seller. It's biographies and real stories that are higher selling. So you're marketing to a smaller group of people. And then when you get even more niche like myself, there's an even smaller group of people who read it. There may be a fair amount of people who like to watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel and True Blood and stuff, but then there's not as many who like to read it. So it makes it more difficult to sell. It's a smaller market to sell to. So that's a good horror side.
Yeah, you're almost pigeonholed into that, especially when you're writing something like you're almost a little pigeonholed when you're writing a specific genre because people look at that and go, okay, well, they've got their own personal view of what that genre is, and sometimes you gotta try and meet those expectations, or you might fall behind as well what they expect from that kind of story.
Well, there should be also of course, the fans that are fans are going to be more dedicated because
they are.
So there is, of course, that bonus there. How actually difficult it be? You mentioned, of course, self-published. How actually difficult it is to getting out your word to the public and getting this, marketing your own services?
I was going to say, the publishing part is actually the easiest part, really. It is selling it and promoting it and get your name out there. You always have to be very consistent at it. You're not just writing, you also have to be your marketer, your PR person, your everything, your accountant. So there's a lot of different levels to it. It's easier now for some because there's ebooks. When I had first started, there wasn't any ebooks, so I had to print. So it was a lot more costly to start up. And if you want to have that progression of growing, it's always best to try and come out with something at least once or twice, once a year, every 2 years at least. Because I noticed if you are any longer than that, then you do sort of lose any kind of growth that you have had through book signings, through events like this. So it's always, you have to keep up on it. So you have to be very dedicated.
And actually, I think this is interesting because I was speaking with another author who is here today. His name is Con, and he's just sitting over there. He's also a self-published author, and him and I were discussing the other day that one of the things we find when it comes to self-publishing is branding yourselves. Because when you look at a lot of the commercial authors out there, like Stephen King or James Patterson or John Grisham, they don't really have to, they can sell their books by their name alone. And instead of just putting out a new book, when you're starting out there, you want to promote your book, but the hardest part is getting that name recognition. So you want to try and promote yourselves, put a lot of emphasis on your name. And in a sense, that's where social media comes in handy, is because we do have the Facebook, we do have the Twitter, we do have blogs that we can write, and that's a great way of kind of spreading ourselves out there and expanding. But it also helps to do these kind of events too, like any kind of fan expo or any kind of convention. That way you can meet with people, promote yourselves, show all your marketing stuff. Great way of just gaining that exposure.
Okay. We of course mentioned when it comes to people who watch like Buffy on TV may not actually read. Have you ever thought of actually, or have you ever tried actually doing your fiction on, say, podcasts or audio books? That way it's still of course sticking to the literature, but you're giving it to someone who might not be.
Yeah, I've actually wanted to do audiobooks for quite a while. I've actually had quite a few people ask because they like the genre or whatever. But they might not be able to focus or read long, expensive stuff. And it's something that I haven't been able to get into because either I have to do it myself, which, I don't know, it's a lot of words, or I'd have to pay somebody to do it, and it would probably be quite expensive. So I'd like to, maybe one day I'll play with it, but it is something that is actually becoming more popular and asked for. So yeah, it would be a good thing. It's like that next level of marketing as well. So,
yeah, I find the same thing. I've had numerous people ask me about audiobooks as well, and asking if I would ever do that or if I would be considering that. And, oh yeah, it's definitely something I would love to do. I wouldn't want to do the voicing of it or reading of it. I don't think I would stumble on my words way too much reading my own work. And it'd probably be better just to have a couple of people read it themselves so they can play the different characters and the roles. But audiobooks is definitely something I would love to do down the road. And that's down the road. And podcasts, that's another thing that would be interesting to try, is doing a podcast or anything like that, something a different media. But I'm still not very savvy with a lot of this social media stuff, so I gotta learn how to do that properly first.
Is there any other questions from the people that are watching? Oh, yes.
Is it harder to write horror as opposed to like other genres?
I don't find it, well, you know what, I'm going to say it's going to be the opposite for me. I find it hard to write different genres than it is for horror. I've been a huge horror fan since I was a kid. I used to watch all these horror movies with my dad when I was younger. And then, so I've always had an appreciation for the horror genre. It's when I started to, like with my novel, Oblivion's Paradise, this one here is a cyberpunk novel, so it's more science fiction. That's where things got a little different for me, because I've never really been big on reading science fiction novels, or reading even fantasy novels, and I just recently started reading those types of genres, just so I can familiarize myself with, if I'm going to start crossing over to another genre, I better learn how to write it first by reading it. And so I find it's a little more difficult for me to go into different genres. I wouldn't be able to write just a regular fiction book or a police procedural one or a mystery one. Those would be too difficult for me because I'm not very familiar with that kind of genre.
I think that would be more hard actually to write a technical one because you need to know all the technical stuff.
Yes.
Right? I wouldn't ever. I love CSI, but I would never write it. But is it harder? I don't know. I wouldn't say it's harder because if you have the imagination for it, right? Because really, what you're writing is a good story, right? So you kind of bring them in. The horror part of it is just an extra, really. Like, you can tell my vampire stories without the vampire element. It would just be different. Instead of being needing to feed on blood, it would be an addiction for something else. So we make it more human, right? So it's just an extra element, I think. And then of course there's just the way to fit in your suspense to it, right? So, but then again, that's also building up to an interesting story. So that's all part of the storytelling.
How many people here are writers? Okay, majority, yeah. And of course, all horror authors. Is that? Okay,
Very small number.
Yes.
So when you guys sit down to write your books, do you have a good idea and then you arc the whole story, or do you have a good idea and then you start writing and get a glut of it done and then go back and suss it out? Or is there another method? That's open to both of you guys.
I've done both. When I first started, it actually started, my original idea was just a small little gem, and then it kind of grew. Because I never actually set out to write a novel. It just sort of happened. And then, of course, after having written the first story, I still kind of write by the seat of my pants, basically. My pants are. But I plot more now than I used to. I've done a couple of writing challenges just for fun, and they're really, really short time. So I'm like, geez, this plotting thing is actually really helpful. I should do more of that. Because sometimes I have my gem of an idea, and then I'll start. And then it just kind of grows, and it just kind of plays in my mind as I see it, as I'm writing. And then sometimes if my mind progresses too far to where I'm writing it, I will make notes. I will never ever, and I don't think I ever will, I've never plotted even when I'm 3/4 through. I have never plotted the end. The end just is organic, and it just happens. And
That has
even,
to be an inspirational part of it for you?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, like sometimes stuff will happen and someone will say something and it changes everything. I'm like, shit. Okay, well, didn't see that coming. Yeah, but it's always usually a good thing. So then I will go with it. So it's a little bit of both. Yeah.
I agree with you on that one, because I don't actually plot out my stories themselves. I have an idea of how it's going to start. I have an idea of how it's going to be in the middle. I have an idea of how I want to end it. And then I just kind of progressively see how it goes from there, and I let it. And it's funny too, because I know, and you're probably the same way as me, where when you're writing the character, it's almost like the character's kind of directing you how the story's going to go.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I've always found interesting was when I'm writing, like for instance with the electric coma dream, you know, as much as I wanted to do something nice for her, the character, it seemed like the direction that it was pulling me towards was a different direction, and that was to torment her and make her life miserable throughout the entire book. And it's neat to see that kind of progression when you're writing to each chapter, because I know when I'm writing there, again, you've got the idea, and you're just trying to see what you can fill in there as you get to this point, and that's how my writing works.
I'll get you in the front and get you after.
Is there any specific kind of scene that you find you really don't like writing? Because like, for me, I know it's like romance scenes. Like, it's like, I know this needs to be in here because it fits perfectly, but I don't want to do it because it's like, it's really hard to write. Do you guys have anything like that? Or?
I do too. Okay, mine is actually the transitional part. You have your basic kind of boring part that gets you from part A to part B. But I want to write A, but you have to write filler to get to B, and you're like, oh man. So, but it's important and stuff, but it's those pivotal scenes that I really look forward to. And it's like,
I hate writing kind of like the little filler stuff. It's
yeah.
This is so tedious.
It's always that scene sequel.
No, it's not.
For myself, when it comes to writing, there, like one of the things I tend to avoid, and it's any kind of intimacy between two characters. Yeah. See, when I start writing it, it's like, ooh, I almost feel a little pervy.
What are you saying about me?
That's just, but there is, in the electric coma dream, there is one scene where I did have difficulty writing it, because it is an intimacy scene, but it's a very aggressive and very sadistic kind of intimacy. It's an S&M type of scene that and the reason why I had a hard time writing it was because the character, the antagonist in that scene, just was so revolting to me that I really cringed writing it, and I kind of wanted to get through it as quickly as possible so I could go into stuff that I felt a little more comfortable with. Because I know even my wife, when she read this book and she got to that scene, she told me she threw the book across the room. She hated the character. She was like, oh, he's just a horrendous monster, very abhorrent there. And I was like, oh, I know, I had trouble writing it.
That's a great
So,
character.
yeah.
You in the back?
Yes, I know that some horror authors started by submitting short stories to magazines. Can you expand a little bit on where the short story is today? Horror fiction, like is it popular? Do they still appear in magazines?
There's, in Edmonton, there's On Spec magazine. They do speculative fiction. I believe they take horror genre as well. Yeah, they've been around forever, and they sell all the time. They're probably here, actually. They're usually at these functions, but it's a good place if you don't want to go into anything bigger. It's something to start into. There's lots still out there.
Yeah, I actually think that short story, especially short horror fiction, is still very popular. Like if you go to Amazon.com and if you take a look at some of the ebooks that they've got, there's a lot of short horror fiction and even short horror anthologies. Anthologies are a big thing.
Yeah.
I know there's one website I like to go to. It's horrornovelreviews.com, and they constantly are reviewing. I always find it's constantly a review of short horror fiction, and they like to do the contest as well, where they, like in particular this October, they got a contest where they're asking people to write about a sequel or to write a short fan fiction of the Halloween movie series and submit that to them. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And so they like to do that, where they send out these little contests where to challenge you to write a short horror fiction, and if they get enough people putting through some stories, they usually make a little anthology book to put out. And so I find that even short horror or short genre fiction is still very popular. I'm not too sure if they still got that one magazine, Weird magazine, Weird Fantasy. It was one that H.P. Lovecraft started out.
Oh, really? Oh.
Yeah, and it was really popular for all the short fiction as well for genre, for horror. Yeah. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah.
I'll get her. Yeah, you.
How do you deal with writer's block? I'm struggling so hard right now. Like, how do you, like, what do you
Right now. Well, you're
Well-
you got a panel.
How long has it been since you wrote last?
Well, like a week, but I'm in school for writing, right? So like it's constant all the time, and I just hate everything. I've been writing for about 6 months.
Are you working on, like, are you planning on, is it like a full length or is it a short story? I'm quizzing you now.
It's pieces of prose, screenplays, like random things, even like academic papers. Like it's just brutal.
Well, normally I would just say, just kind of plug away at it. Sometimes too, it's good to take a break from it. Don't take too long though, because it is really hard to get back into it if you take too much time.
Especially when you've got the internet and a game like Pet Rescue on your eye.
Oh, all right.
I've revealed something about
Candy
myself.
Crush. But if you're doing a lot of writing for school, I would imagine I could see why the creativity kind of gets drained out of you, no offense.
Yeah, no, totally.
Because you're probably writing stuff that's probably very dry, right? So my suggestion would be let it stew in your mind for a little bit. Like just kind of think about the story and maybe what scene you want to work towards. And then, maybe something will just kind of trigger it. And just kind of sit down at the computer and just kind of plug away. You might have to erase the first couple sentences and start over again. But if you give yourself enough time to kind of process what you kind of want to work on, I find that you can usually muster through it. I will try, except for when I'm at events like this, I will try to write every day, even if it's like 100 words. At least I've tried. And it'll be like, oh, or sometimes I'll have lots of ideas, and it's there, but I'm tired. It's been a long day. It's been a long week, and it's like it ain't gonna come through the fingers. It's just not gonna happen. So I just kind of save it, or if it's a really big idea, I'll write it down. But yeah, just kind of process it a bit before you start going at it. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah.
If I can actually even add to that one, like I write for Movie Jerks. I have my own podcast. It's actually a award-winning podcast and blog, so I'll plug that right now. I actually get it too, and we're supposed to write a blog every week, which we don't do because I get writer's block. And one of the things that I was actually told was to write something completely different that's not related, and it's something that you won't be putting out to people to read afterwards, like either maybe a grocery list or a letter to some friend, or even something like a hate mail letter to somebody you want to. Something completely different, so you get your mind off of it, and when you go back, it's sort of an easy slip back into it.
So you say invent on Facebook and then go
Invent on Facebook, yeah, but there's something where you get your mind off that category. That's what I was told, and that seems to work for me. So,
For myself, I find that when I get into those periods where I'm not too sure what I want to write about, and this happened to me in particularly when I was going to college. I took journalism in college, and you're constantly writing every single day, bloody article after article after article, and after a while you just get so drained of writing that you're just like, I don't want to write anything. But for myself, I find when I get into those points where I'm so bogged down from writing that I'm not too sure what to write about, I just kind of find something to stimulate my mind. And generally it'll be just sitting there with my headphones on listening to music, and if I get a nice tune, if I hit a tune that I really like, then my mind just kind of starts working away, and I go, okay, yeah, you know what, I'm starting to see something with the music, or even watching a movie or a TV show, and I might just, if I get really, really unsure what to write, I'll sit there and watch an entire season of one TV series, and I'll sound like, yeah, I feel confident enough that I can write something now, I've got some ideas brewing, and there we go. So I find it's, for me, it's just find something to stimulate my mind.
oh, sorry, in the back, yeah.
When you're writing, what are your suggestions in terms of building interest and suspense leading up to a reveal, whether it's a secret or a monster or some other driving force behind the story?
I would say it is give little bits. It's kind of like a horror movie, a good horror movie, where you see just a little bit. So you just give a little hint to it. I don't know how to explain it. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, you want to be subtle about it.
Yeah, you don't want to give too much away, right? So it'll be like, I don't know, bad example. Someone's following you, but you don't know what's going on. So you look, but there's nothing there. And then grow to, okay, now I see a shadow. You just want to build onto, because you are hopefully going to know who the bad guy is or creature, so you can progressively add, it's like another element into the story, right? So, does that?
It's almost like a slow build up to it. So when you're writing, like what they say is when you're writing fiction, to create that suspense and to slow things down a bit, you write longer sentences. To speed up the action, you write shorter sentences with lots of adjectives there, just to increase the intensity. For instance, one of the things with my novel, The Master and the Servant, I do have something like that where I kind of build up the suspense for a big reveal. And what I do is throughout the novel, I have this character who's walking around, and every time I introduce the character again, he's carrying around this item in his hand. And I don't mention too much about it, but each time I mention this item, I give a new element of what the item is to describe the item. So he's walking around with this ball-shaped item in his arms. The next time I introduce him, he's got this ball-shaped item wrapped in a stained cloth. And then going on forward, maybe that same cloth is a red blood-stained. And then after a while, when you get to the point where you go, here's the reveal, people have already gotten that hint, and they go, ah, I got it now. And it kind of creates that moment where it's like, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful.
So I just have a question. You guys said you've been writing for 15, 20 years. When you finish a work, how did you find was the best way to get the word out there? And how has that changed from when you started to now?
Social media. Well, when I started, hell, there was no Google. So, back then there was really nothing. I'd contact the local paper when I do a book launch at a bookstore. But now, you can, like what I tend to do is to sort of draw interest in stuff. You'll take pictures of, like when I get my hard copy, right? So it's like, ooh, it's almost there. I have, I'll take small, short excerpts and I'll put it onto an image and I'll tweet on Facebook about that. Something to generate interest in stuff, right? So Facebook and Twitter has helped a lot with that. So it's just the small things. I do book trailers as well. They're just something fun. And that kind of is another element that adds to, hopefully, interest. So those little things.
It's one of those things where you're trying to attack as many visual and auditory senses as possible to make the item look, or make the item intriguing to people.
Yeah, pull them in.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
That is the goal, yeah, because even like, I know one of the things I like to do as well is kind of create little bookmarks or, bookmarks are a thing that we hand out at the conventions, little postcards with the information on it and brochures, postal prints and all that. So I know because we both try, we both do as much as we can to promote ourselves as best as we can. Because I know I'm not the greatest with the Twitter or the Facebook.
Yeah, it's funny you're not. I'm like, you're too young. You should be good at this.
Yeah, well, I have to get my wife to do it for me. I'm like, I'll write something for my Twitter or my Facebook there. I'll be like, oh, releasing this new book. And my wife's looking at it. She goes, what are your hashtags? I'm like, hashtags? What are those? Well, you need to put down horror, cyberpunk, expo, and oh my god, that's a lot of work. Can't do that.
We're getting close to the end here. Does anyone else have any more questions? Well, here's actually, I guess, ask the common one. I'm surprised it wasn't asked yet. What scares you?
Oh. Yeah, I was thinking the same
Not
thing.
much.
No, not really. Clowns. I don't like clowns. I don't like the guys that walk around in the full, like, Muppet puppet head. Like, that I don't like. Give me a horror movie, I don't care. But, yeah, no, clowns and that I don't like. That scares me like big time.
Yeah, you know what? I find it funny because my wife and I have this conversation all the time. She goes, "What are you afraid of?" I'm like, "I'm not afraid of anything," And I'm sure there's something that'll startle me. Video games, the horror video games. I can't play those. Those
Do you
scare the
play with
crap
the
out of me.
headset on?
Oh, I can't even do that. Like playing that. I think it was Dead Island and what was there's another game that just recently, The Last of Us. I tried playing those games and. I get probably a little bit ways in, and then all of a sudden I start seeing these monsters come and start attacking me, and I stop playing that game. I can't do it anymore. My dude's going to get hurt. I don't want that. So I can't play those games. That's what scares me, playing those ones. They're too intense.
Yeah, with Last of Us, I was afraid for the characters. I enjoyed the characters so much. I was like, I don't want to see them get hurt.
Exactly.
I'm not a very good video game player, so I'm not going to do that to you.
Oh, yeah.
Anyone else have any questions? We just had a 5-minute warning, so we're going to be wrapping up pretty quickly.
Is anybody wanting to be self-published or anything like that?
I was just curious if you guys use beta readers or not.
I have beta readers, I also have editors. So when I first started, I couldn't afford editors. I've paid for editors, very, very expensive. Even with a beta, give them a sample and see if the two of you mesh. Because I've had experience with an editor and we had completely different writing styles. So it made it very, very difficult. And because she wanted to change practically the voice, right? So I need you to just change grammar. You need to tell me if I've got loopholes, you gotta do that sort of thing, but don't change my voice. It was really, really rough. I have 2 editors now that are really good, so I'm very, very grateful for that. I used to go through more in the very beginning. I used to have more people read through, but they weren't necessarily editors. They were motivated like. And then as I progressed, I was able to. But it's very important, even if it's just friends at first. Yeah.
Because it's nice too, because they'll catch things that you might not necessarily catch because you are writing the novel.
Oh, you know so much more than they do too, right? So they're going to catch because you already know so much of the story and the characters that you think it's there, but it's not.
Yeah.
So they'll catch those little things too.
Oh yeah, because I know sometimes when I'm reading through and doing my own editing, you'll miss that one grammatical error there, and then all of a sudden you pass it over to your editor and they go, okay, fix that. Oh yeah, okay. There you go, I can't believe I missed that. It's so simple.
Even when you send off your manuscript, let's say you're going to go traditional, have it as clean as possible. If it's messy, not good, bad, they won't even actually look at it. So that's another thing. Have it as clean as possible. It doesn't have to be perfect. Nothing's ever perfect. But have it as clean as possible because it helps you get that further step if you want to go traditional.
Yeah, so, and I guess one thing we'll have to let everybody know before they leave, whereabouts, which hall are we located in?
H.
We're in Hall H. That's where you can find us. I wasn't even too sure where my booth was for a little bit. And then Candace, my wife, told me it was 901 as well. And,
701.
yeah, so feel free to stop by our booth, ask us any questions if you want. We'll be sure to answer. Thank you for coming out.
Thanks for coming out. Give a round of applause for Erika.